Okay, hello everyone. My name is Fulya Kiroglu, and I am a Sierra postdoctoral fellow at Northwestern University. And today I'm going to be talking about my very recent work on using spins to trace different black hole growth mechanisms in young massive star clusters. So here I am showing you an image made by Aaron Geller at Northwestern showing about 200 binary black hole mergers detected so far, sorted by mass. As you can see in blue circles, their masses span a wide range, from just a few solar masses up to a few hundred. Despite the significant theoretical work and rising sample, we still don't know where these black holes come from. Several formation mechanisms have been proposed to explain the origins of these systems. These are including isolated binary evolution, triples, AGN disks, primordial black holes, and dynamical assembly in dense stellar environments. While most of these mergers expected to come from first-generation black holes that form from collapse of massive stars, some fraction of these mergers come from hierarchical assembly, typically expected to happen in dense stellar environments like globular clusters, nuclear star clusters, or young star clusters. And most of the massive black holes that are above the pair instability gap are expected to come from this hierarchical merger channel that comprise about 10% of the detected events. Today, I'm going to be instead talking about how to form massive black holes in mass gap from first-generation black holes through stellar interactions in these dense systems. So, it's been shown in the past several years, globular clusters can retain large populations of black holes. And we know very well that these black holes shape their long-term dynamical evolution, and they shape their present-day structures that we observe today. The consequence of these large populations of black holes in these dense systems is the dynamically assemble of these binaries and their ultimate merger. So what we know so far from our globular cluster models is it's mostly dominated by their present-day structures because their birth conditions are very highly uncertain. These include their initial densities, masses, initial mass functions, especially their binary fractions that are mass-dependent. So our models only keep track of black hole dynamics, and these are based on all globular cluster properties, especially assuming low mass binary fraction. In reality, we expect massive stars to born in binaries, and these binaries play an important role affecting the properties of the gravitational wave sources these systems produce. So today I'm going to be addressing how today's gravitational wave sources are shaped by stellar interactions that we expect to happen in young star clusters. So over the past decades, we know binaries play an important role in the dynamical evolution of clusters. They provide energy source which prevents them from a deep core collapse. Recent studies shown that binaries, especially massive stars, play an important role promoting the stellar mergers that can lead to very massive stellar objects that become mass gap black holes or even intermediate mass black holes. Recently, I've shown that massive binaries also promote interactions between black holes and stars. These interactions can happen through mergers if they're in initial binaries, or through collisions or tidal disruptions during their hyperbolic encounters. So here I'm showing you the mass ratio of colliding black holes and stars, assuming different high mass binary fraction in our models. If we assume only 5%, you see that most of the black holes are colliding with low mass stars, which doesn't have a big impact on their mass or spin evolution, but if we increase the high mass binary fraction up to 100%, these black holes collide with massive stars that primordially come from dominantly come from primordial binaries we initially put in our cluster, and these interactions happen very early on, less than 10 megayear. So these, in these models, we see that about more than 50% of binary black holes mergers are affected by these interactions. And to follow up, recently, to see how these interactions leave imprints on their gravitational wave sources, I performed some cluster Monte Carlo simulations of these systems using self-consistent prescriptions for accretion as well as black hole mergers to keep track of their spin and mass evolution. Here in this plot, I am showing all the black hole mergers within Hubble time we observe in our models, their primary and secondary masses. And we identify different ways of forming mass gap black holes in these models. Initially, stellar mergers dominate within the 5 mega year of the cluster evolution, and I'm showing them with blue circles. And the mass gap we assume is about 40 solar mass in our model, so stellar mergers can contribute to mass gap black holes just slightly the mass gap, just above the mass gap. Next, we start to have black hole star encounters, and accretion-driven growth play an important role. And especially we see that accretion-driven growth can extend the black hole mergers to upper right region here, where we have roughly equal mass ratios, and both black holes are in the mass gap. Finally, hierarchical mergers come into play, and these are typically second-generation black holes beyond mass gap, and they tend to have unequal mass ratios, as these are typically 1G and 2G mergers. So what is interesting here is different channels, accretion and hierarchical mergers, they leave distinct growth signatures even though their fractions are roughly similar. So recent study by Ray and Calagura identified that their high mass populations in the data have a unique mass ratio distribution. Specifically, they identified about 50% of high mass black holes tend to have nearly equal mass ratios, and the remaining one tends to be unequal. And this is consistent with our predictions from the combination of hierarchical mergers and stellar encounters, which leads to different mass ratios. So next, we also look at the spin mass correlations that came from these different types of black hole growth channels. I'm showing you the coeffective distribution as a function of primary mass. And on the top, if we don't assume any accretion onto black holes, we see that we can grow black holes up to 80 solar mass. This comes from the second generation black holes. And since we initially assume black holes are not spinning when they're formed, their spin distribution broadens with mass from their hierarchical mergers. But in order to grow them beyond, we need more massive clusters with escape speeds greater than 50 kilometers per second. But if we allow black holes to accrete, specifically if we allow 50% of the stars to be accreted, we see that we can push the primary mass up to a few hundred, even more. 100% accretion efficiency can give us black holes with primary masses, black hole mergers with primary masses up to 200. So typical globular clusters with moderate escape speeds, they are difficult to produce very massive gravitational wave events like GW2311 because of the limitation from this gravitational recoil kicks And in this event specifically, both black holes are greater than 100 solar mass, and they have very high spins. So it's challenging to produce them from hierarchical merger scenario. But we can see from coherent accretion episodes allow black holes to have a nearly maximum spinning values and at right masses above 100. Beyond a few hundred, we start to see narrowing of the coeffective distribution because of the random orientated multiple accretion episodes, which tends to spin down. The last thing I wanted to show, in addition to spin magnitudes, these interactions also shape the spin orbit orientations of the gravitational wave sources we produce in these systems. We find that about 10% of the binary black holes, after they are formed, they can interact with stars as well. And performing some hydrodynamical simulations of these binary black hole and star interactions, we see that after the star is disrupted, stellar debris is shared by both black holes, and we end up to individual accretion disks around the black holes. And through the tidal torques and angular momentum exchange during the pericenter passages, we can give them spins aligned with their initial orbital angular momentum. So this shows that we can potentially produce preferentially aligned black hole mergers even in globular clusters. Just to show you some new data analysis by this work again, Rai-Calogero, they find even globular clusters, we know, like the gas-free interactions produce isotropic spin distributions, but more massive mergers tend to have a slight preference for alignment. And the next project I will be working on is just looking if we can potentially shift the isotropic distribution towards the positive values for especially high mass black hole mergers. So I'm going to leave my summary here, and here's our work. If you would like to read more, and happy to take questions.
Do you have some prediction for X-ray sources in these young massive clusters that could be compared with observations?
You mean X-ray binaries or just X-ray?
Well, I mean, if you have accretion of...
Yes, we have, several papers look into this, like the transient signatures of these kind of events. Mm-hmm. Since these events are expected to be super Eddington regime, they can have like high X-ray luminosities. Also, it can be like reprocessed and optical UV regime.
Okay.
Hi, Lieke van Son, Radboud University. Mm-hmm. Cool work. I kind of had a similar question about the accretion, and maybe I missed it, but how much super Eddington were these events? Like, how much did you actually allow the black holes to accrete?
So yeah, we vary the accretion efficiency like between 50 to 100, and
of the star.
Right.
Yeah. So okay, and how much Eddington luminosity is that for the specific?
These are like super, like about like several orders of magnitude,
so
like 10 to the 5 even.
Right. And I had a quick other question. Yeah. So you also said, okay, we can kind of produce GW 231123, but you put your parent stability limit at 40, right? Yes. So how many generation would a 231123 system be in your?
For accretion-driven growth, or
was it? Yeah. How did you form it? I thought it was a multiple generation, but was it an accretion-driven result, or was it
accretion-driven, especially the accretion of very massive stars onto black holes. And these needs to be single accretion episodes, otherwise black hole spins tends to spin down from multiple accretion episodes. Single accretion episodes can give you very high spins, depending on the accretion efficiency, of course, but yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Johan Samsing. It's very interesting that you find these spin-orbital like alignment configurations. What I'm trying to understand is that like many of these binaries that get this spin-orbit alignment might also be kicked out of the cluster and merge outside of the cluster. So I wonder how much of that memory that's still left after it has been kicked out.
Yes, that's a great question. So once these binary black holes interact with stars, even if they can gain alignment, another encounter can just randomize their orientation, right? So the ones that I focus on relatively compact so that they can merge, and these interactions also tend to shrink the binary black hole orbit. So if they merge right after they collide, that can give a preferential alignment, but otherwise, they could totally be randomized.
I mean, we did some scattering some year back, and we never really published this, but it looks like that you still have some of the alignment, or still have some of the memory back, even though that you do scatterings. Just because of how the kick vector is aligned with, how the third object is coming in. So if you just keep track of how it's not completely randomized.
These should be merged in cluster, other than getting ejected and then merged later.
No, if they've been kicked out, they will still be able to have some of the memory.
Of the
spin-orbit alignment, yeah.
They can still.
Yeah, so it would be interesting to calculate that ratio. Like you might have many more that have been kicked out, but still have a slight memory. Could give rise to this skewness.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for pointing that out.
Great. I think we're going to have to hold the questions till the end of the session, but keep those in mind. And let's thank our speaker again.